Welcome to part 2 of the Bulletproof Forms in Excel tutorial series. Here I'm going to focus on the data validation and some of the sort of special formatting. So I'll show you how to get this phone number down here into this format. I'll show you how to make this little comment that pops up, how to make the little warning message that we get if we input the incorrect value, and how to set the data validation structure up so you can make your own custom rules. If you haven't already watched part 1 of this series, go ahead and watch that where I show you how to create basically most of what you can see here. And now it's time to make it more functional. Before we start, check the video description and click the link to TeachExcel so you can download the files for the tutorial and follow along. And make sure to subscribe and accept notifications so you can see all the new tutorials. Here's where we left off in part 1. Now let's get right into it. We're going to back up a little bit so we can work with the form a little better. Let's go to the View tab and add back our headings, our formula bar, and our grid lines, and zoom out a little bit. Now what I'm going to show you here is kind of a trick. It's a different way perhaps, or a different approach to using data validation and also conditional formatting in the spreadsheet. And the goal will be to make it easier to manage our rules. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over here to the right of the form and we're going to type validation. That's going to be sort of our title, our header for this column. And I'm going to put all of the validation rules outside here. So everything that controls what we can enter into this form here is going to go over here in the right. Now, the way that we're going to control what you can input is called data validation. If you don't know what that is, I'll explain it briefly now. You go to the Data tab and you can check Data Validation right here, or just select a cell and hit Alt-DL, and this Data Validation window pops up. And here on the Settings tab, under Allow, we click the drop-down arrow, and we can choose to limit what the user can enter into the cell. So the default is any value, anything. We can do whole number, so that's the same as an integer, decimal, a list of values. This is where we get our drop-down menu or our drop-down list. We can do dates, times, text length, or custom. And custom is actually what we're going to be using here for most of the options. Custom allows you to enter a formula. And this way you can reference something in the worksheet. You can make all sorts of special custom formulas here. And this is going to be vitally important when we do the sector, where we want the first part a letter, the second character a dash, and the third character a number. But when you're dealing with very easy rules, you can just use one of these simple things up here. Let's say a whole number. And then if you want it to be between, equal to, less than, whatever, between 1 and 10. Now when you hit OK, you've got a very simple data validation rule. If I enter 1, it works. If I enter 2, it works. If I enter 0, we get an error. 11, error. So that's the basics of data validation. Select the cell, Alt-DL, and our little window opens. And this is how I recommend that you do data validation for most of everything that you do in Excel. Use one of these simple, easy to use little features. But we're not going to do that here. In every example except for the date, we're going to use a custom formula here and point the formula back to the spreadsheet. So let me show you what we're going to do. I'm going to hit Clear All to remove the data validation. Now we can enter anything in here. And let's go over here. So data validation works in a very simple premise. If we're using a custom formula, it has to evaluate to true or false, because data validation is on or off. It's allowed or it's not allowed, it being the value. The name validation is very simple. We want to allow pretty much every character. But what I do want to check is I want to make sure that the length is correct. Use the len function, select the cell, and make sure that the length is greater than 0. Make sure there's more than 0 characters in the cell. Right now it evaluates to false. The moment I input anything, text, number, whatever, it evaluates to true. And this is how we're going to make our data validation rules. So you use a function, then we use a comparison operator, and then something that we compare it to, in this case a number. If I just removed the greater than 0, we would just get the count. So it's 1. When you do a comparison, greater than 0. Is 1 greater than 0? Yes, true. That's how this works. Now we're going to combine this with the AND function. So the AND function allows you to test multiple conditions. Equals AND. Now I can test len, so open parentheses, make sure that that is greater than 0. Now comma, and I want to make sure the length is less than 100. In this case, that's an arbitrary value. Oops, len, this cell, less than 100. Close the parentheses for and we have true. Delete it, and we get false once again. So what we have here are two formulas that evaluate to either true or false within the AND function. This is basic data validation stuff, but it's very powerful. It allows us to test multiple conditions. Now, how am I going to attach data validation? Very simple. Select the cell, Alt-DL, go down here, Custom, go into Formula, click the little arrow to get it out of the way, and select the cell that has the data validation in it. Now, don't worry about where you put this stuff. As long as you're not going to have any other data on the sheet that has our form, it doesn't matter where we put it. We're going to take care of it and make it disappear later. So I select the cell that has my data validation condition that evaluates to true or false. Hit enter. Okay. Now I have a data validation condition. Now data validation by default allows empty cells. So even though this returns false right now, it's not going to cause a problem. But let's say that I said it has to be greater than 1. So no name is just one letter, I don't believe. If I do A, enter, data validation is triggered. And now you're starting to see the beauty of putting these conditions out here outside the cell. Because all I had to do, I didn't have to select the cell and go to the data validation window and change anything. I only had to go to this cell and change one little thing and then hit enter, and data validation was updated. Now, if I really wanted to, I could go to the Formulas tab and the Name Manager, and I could save some values or a formula or functions in a name and then reference that name. That might be the more professional way to do it, but there's no point, absolutely no point in doing that with how we're going to build this form. This form is going to allow us to manage it very easily in the spreadsheet. We don't have to go to Name Manager. We don't have to do that crap, so don't worry about it. Now let's go ahead and create a condition for ID. Let's make it this, greater than 10. So equals this cell greater than 10, false, 9, false, 10, false, 11, true. Now for the start date, I'm not necessarily going to manage this over here. In a way I am. I want to make sure that the start date isn't empty. So I'll do equals len, just keep it real simple. Oops, equals len here greater than 0, sure. But I want to manage the start date. I want to manage the date in data validation. So Alt-DL, go down here, date, oops, date greater than, and let's type January 1st, 2000. Let's say that's when the company was started, so no employee could have worked there before that date. Hit OK. And now the data validation is going to manage that for us. We don't have to deal with any formulas or functions over here. When you're dealing with dates, it's very helpful to manage this feature within data validation because dates are very easy to mess up. Use data validation to make sure the date works here. So let's enter a correct one. And then use this to simply make sure that something was entered over here, because data validation will only allow you to enter a correct value over here, and this will only be true if a value has been entered over here. Now you can check if the length of the cell, the characters in the cell, is greater than 0. You could also do something like equals is blank to check if it was blank or not. And if you wanted to make that return a correct value, you could type not in front of it. Not makes true false and false true. So with a not, it is true. Without the not, it is false. So that's just a little quick trick using the not function is blank function. But I'm using the len function for everything else, so let's keep it consistent. Now it's time to do department. I'm actually going to come back to that one. And sector, I'm going to come back to that one. Let's skip down to phone. So for phone, I'm going to do very simple. Equals is, where are we? Number. So that'll be my first condition. Let's make sure that works. ASD, false, 1, 2, 3, true. And let's make sure that this is long enough. Let's say greater than or equal to 7. Now this cell has to have at least 7 characters in it, and they must all be numbers. So false, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. True. Let's put an A in there. False. Now let's go ahead and do that cool formatting I showed you with the phone. What you want to do is to right-click the cell, go down here to Format Cells, go to the Number tab, Special, and type, select phone number, select your locale. That's important because phone numbers change based on country. Then hit OK. Now we can see the phone number automatically has a dash in it, but if I double click, it's just numbers. So the appearance of the phone number changes, but the number itself doesn't change. And if I go ahead and enter an area code, expand this a little bit, it puts parentheses around the area code for us. So that's a really cool little formatting trick. All you had to do, right-click the cell, go to Format Cells, Number tab, and then from the Special category, choose phone number. Now let's go down here. Don't forget to set data validation. We're doing custom formula equals our little guy right here. Now let's go to sector. So I'm going to save department for last because that's going to be a drop-down list, and we're not going to be able to really manage that so well from this worksheet at all. So it's going to be a little bit more involved. Here for sector, I'm going to show you a more complex data validation rule. Is we want to have the first letter be A, the middle letter a character a dash, and the last one a number. Now when you're dealing with more complex things, more complex formulas, functions, it's better to break them up. Oh, and I want to make sure that it's only 3 characters long. So let's do that one first. Equals len equals 3. Make sure it's 3 characters. Test it out. 1, 2, 3, no problem. 1, 2, 3, 4, problem. 1, 2, 3. All right. Now let's go with the next one. Let's make sure that the first character is A equals left. We're going to use the left function. Select the text. Now, if I don't enter the next argument, it automatically just gets 1 character. But I don't like leaving it off because it's easier to forget what it is if you come back to the spreadsheet 6 months later. So let's put the number of characters in. 1 equals A. True. So you can see here this is not case sensitive. It's a lowercase a. Go ahead and put a B. False. So go ahead and test it every time you add a new condition or a new unit there. Now what we want to do is we want to get the second character. To get the second character, we use the mid function. So mid function, first we select the text. Start number, I want it to start at number 2. The dash will be the second character. How many characters do I want to pull in? Just 1. And close the parentheses. Now if I just hit enter, we're going to get the second character from the cell. You can see that's an S. But we want to do a comparison. So equals, double quote, dash, double quote. Does it equal that? Nope. What if I put a dash in? Yep. Good to go. Now the last one's going to be a little bit tricky because we want to pull the character out of the cell and then check if it's a number. First thing we want to do equals write that, comma, how many characters to get? 1. Once again, you could leave it off. In this case, it would work without a problem, but I do not like to leave it off. 1. So we get D. Let's go ahead and make that a number. But let's go ahead and use the isNumber function to check if this is a number. False. Okay, because we're getting it from this cell that has all this other stuff in it. Let's see what would happen if it was just numbers. Still false. So you can see that what we need to do is we need to figure out a way to actually turn the 3 into a 3 if the 3 is a 3. And the way to do that is to use the number value function. So I'm going to go ahead and actually build this out into 3 separate cells really quickly. Equals number value. Select the text, close the parentheses. Now go to the next one. Equal is number. Select that one, enter true. So here you can see all of the 3 parts of the formula spread out. First we get a 3, but it sees it as text. We convert it to a number, then we test it. Let's test it with something that's not a number. Perfect. Once again, perfect. Now we can combine all of these. So what we can do here, take the write function, put them right in here for the cell reference. Then we can get this guy, go right over here, copy him in for the cell reference. And now we have one nice, neat formula. Now we need to combine all 4 of these things into one. Remember how to do that? Simple, and function. So let's go over here, get the first one, copy him, equals, and open parentheses, put them in there, close the parentheses so we can come back to it. Let's get the second guy, copy him, go here, put a comma, so it'll be the second argument, enter, go here to get the third guy, and just copy and paste it in. Trust me when I say your life will be much easier if you build complex formulas the way that I just built it. Troubleshooting sucks in Excel. Now we can test everything out. So we can see what doesn't work. That one, this one. Make a dash. This should be just the last one or in the first one that's a problem because there's no A and that's not a number. So A-1, perfect. Now let's delete these guys, we don't need them. Let's get this guy, get him out of here, and put him right in here. Now you tell me it's easier to manage this within the data validation window than it is here in the spreadsheet. Because I can tell you it's not. Now let's go here. Remember, we have to connect our data validation. Alt-DL, custom, formula, select the correct cell, hit OK. Now it's all linked up. Error. Perfect. Perfect. Here, I do want to add a comment. If you remember in the example from the first tutorial, I had a little comment that popped up right here. So we can go to the Review tab, New Comment. Let's delete what's already in here. I don't like that. And sometimes you have to turn off bold. Okay. Format has to have an A, has to have a dash, has to have a number sign. Now I'm actually going to go ahead and make this bold and make it smaller. There is actually a lot more formatting that you can do with comments, but I just don't care, and usually it doesn't matter inside of a form. Not a simple one at least. All right, now when we hover over it, format a-number. Let's make this guy capitalized just because it's annoying me. Okay, wow. Now we've got everything except for the department. Now, one thing I want to tell you before I show you the complex way to do this, well, it's not the most complex, but it's more complex than one way. If I select this, Alt-L, and I go here, and I go List, I can make a nice, simple drop-down menu. Item 1, comma, item 2, comma, item 3, whatever. No equal sign, no quotation marks, no nothing. Just type it, separate each item with a comma, hit OK, and now we have our drop-down menu. That's the really easy way to do it. And in most circumstances, probably you can do it like this. And if you want to do it like this, you can skip what'll probably be the next 2 or 3 minutes of the tutorial. But now, let's remove that. And I'll show you how to make a dynamic one that will automatically update when you add new items. Now for this, I'm actually going to put it on another worksheet. Actually, let me rename this guy first, Form. And let's call this Presentation Data. Now I could put this on the same worksheet, but if you're building a large or complex form, you might want to have all of your source data on a separate worksheet. This stuff here, the validation and what I'm going to put next to it, conditional formatting, it should stay here. It helps you better organize it. But over here, we're going to control our lists, so our drop-down menus. So it was for, I believe, department. There's our lists. Green, orange, blue. Very lovely, unique names. They must have been made by the government. All right. Now, what a lot of people do is they make a dynamic formula that references this and it automatically updates when you add new values. But dynamic formulas are a pain in the butt, and I don't want to use them. So let's use something much better, much easier. We have this, we have our header here. Make sure you put a title up here. It'll make your life a lot easier. Go to Insert, Table. Make sure that My Table Has Headers is checked if you have a header row, which you should, because I just told you to. Hit OK. Now we have a table, and don't worry about the formatting. God, I hate this formatting, but it doesn't matter. No one's going to see this worksheet tab. So now what we can do is go to the Formulas tab, go to Name Manager, and if you do that, you're going to see the name of this table right here, Table 1. Let's go ahead and change this table so it's a little bit more descriptive. So click the table, go to Design, go over here, and I'm going to call it Department. It doesn't have to be the same name as your title up here, but if you only have one column in the table, it makes sense to keep it the same name. So Department, Enter. Now let's go back to the Name Manager, and let's add a new name. So this one references a table. Hit New. If you have your cursor already within the table, occasionally it'll pre-populate it with some data down here. But what we want here, I'm going to call the name of this Department List. Make it descriptive because we are going to reference this later on. Comment, don't worry about that unless you really don't know what this has to do with. But here it's just the department list. Now we want to direct it to do something with our table that we just created. We want to include it in this variable. So we type equals the name of the table, easy to remember because we called it the same as the title, department. Then open bracket, it's a square bracket, and the name of the column, department. Then close square bracket. Now if I select away in the comment box and then click back down here, you'll see that it highlights the data within the table inside the department column. If you have multiple columns, you can go ahead and reference the different columns based off of their title up here, so based off of the header column. Here I'm just going to have one table for this list of data, and if I had another table, I could put that over here, make sure there's a blank column in between them, and I'll just have multiple tables and tables and tables, and that way reference them with this very easy to remember format. equals name of the table, bracket, name of the column, bracket. That's it. Now, with this, we can reference it in our data validation list. That can seem kind of confusing. You might have to re-watch that section a few times. The name manager can be kind of new and kind of weird. But if you mess things up, just go down here and click Edit, and you can re-edit it down here. Now that we have this, let's go to the Form tab, Department, Alt-DL, Allow, List, click in here, and if you forget the name, you can simply hit F3 on the keyboard, and it's going to come up with a list of all the names that you created, so the ones from our name manager. And here we can see department list. So hit OK, and it's just equals department list, no quotation marks, no nothing. Hit OK. Now we have our department list, green, orange, blue, black. Now let's go over here, add a value, purple. Go to form, purple. Makes life so much easier. So now that we have this set up here, we still need a value over here because we're going to use this to manage our conditional formatting very shortly. So let's just keep it simple, equals len greater than 0. So if I delete it, false, select a value, true. So now in our form, we have set up data validation for every single cell. We've set up formatting here, and we have also set up this little hint right here and a comment that's going to tell us the format we should use for this cell. Now this tutorial is getting a little bit long in the tooth, but I want to tell you just one more thing real quick because this validation guy over here can seem a little weird. We're actually, in the next tutorial, I'm going to add a conditional formatting column. Let's just call it formatting. And this column here is going to output either true or false based on the values in the validation column and the values in two new cells that I'm going to put over here. So it's going to check both of those conditions for each one of these inputs and return a true or false value. That, used in conjunction with the macro that runs when we click the Submit button, is what allows us to only show the data validation red boxes here after the button has been clicked and not right now. For instance, this is false. This is empty. Why isn't it red? Well, because I don't want it to be red until the user has clicked the Submit button. So this has to do with usability of the form, but it actually requires a little bit more work than you might expect to get it to work. And having all of these guys out here makes our life so much easier. So remember, even when you manage the data validation within the cell itself, such as for the list and for the start date, here in this example, you should still have a value out here that can then be used as a proxy for the data validation. So even though the data validation here doesn't reference this cell, the conditional formatting tricks that we're going to use will reference this cell. That can sound tricky and it can sound confusing, I know, but bear with me and you're going to have a pretty cool form by the end of this. In the next tutorial, we're going to tie up all of the formatting and the macro and combine it to have a really lovely usable form. I hope you liked the tutorial. If it was helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe and accept notifications so you can see all the new tutorials.